Good morning. My truck caught fire yesterday. Nothing really serious. Got a short in one of the cables from the battery, and it burned up. The cable, that is, not the truck. So it's off in the shop, getting repaired. Normally, I would do these things myself, but I am out in the woods, and I don't have any spare battery cables that I can cobble together, so off it goes. There were a few other things I wanted to look for anyways, from a competent mechanic, and it's about time to put on my snow tires too, so I should be able to do that. What that means though is that I'm using Shank's mare now. Well, we both are. Pepper doesn't mind. And I had to walk here, which is only 3 kilometers, but now that I'm here, I can rest a little bit and use this as an opportunity to introduce a new series of videos that I have planned on for quite a while, and this is just as good a time as any to start them, and that has to do with let's see, how am I going to title it? I'm going to title it Practical Mars Colonization. I think that's what I'll use as a title. You may think that that's not particularly relevant to what I'm doing here, but between all of the things that I plan on talking about, some related to what I'm doing here, and then other topics that are seemingly more esoteric, some really far out there topics, I would say. They are all kind of related. Now, the first thing that I want to say is that if NASA or SpaceX or somebody gave me a call tomorrow and says, Peter, there's a seat for you, do you want to go to Mars? Wouldn't even hesitate. I'd be gone. I have wanted to go to Mars for a long time, or at least go to another planet. I'm not sure why, but it just intrigues the hell out of me. And I really have to say that I can't say that I'm a particularly adventurous person. I just kind of wind up doing things that seem that way. But they all seem to make sense to me. Now, with regards to going to Mars, I think I would be an excellent candidate. No, I'm not a scientist or a researcher. I don't have an engineering degree or anything like that. But I have an awful lot of practical experience, and I would say also my age, I am 66, makes me an excellent candidate to go. I think I would make a really good practical contribution to the survival of people on Mars. But in the end, it wouldn't be particularly noteworthy, my contribution, except for one thing. My ultimate aspiration, although it sounds morbid, I think would be important, would be I would really like to be the first person to die of old age on Mars. And that really is the segue into the topic of this conversation, which is death and dying in space and someplace other than planet Earth. It's important to understand first just how incredibly, stupidly dangerous going into space is. When you look at the number of people that have died so far going into space, it's a ridiculously small number. And all credit to the scientists and the engineers and all the people that put the equipment together. All credit to them. It's still a flippin' miracle that we haven't killed more people. Rockets are essentially the largest air fuel bombs we routinely make. And we stick people on the top of those things and light a match. That's crazy. And the people that go are fully aware of just how dangerous it is. Most of the rest of us really aren't used to just how on the edge this is. You look at, and I'm going to relate this to automobiles, cars, that you and I are fully, comfortable with, that particular technology. But you look at, say, the shuttle disaster where it blew up on launch, and the what they found was one of the solid rocket boosters, one of the gaskets, sealing gaskets, uh, got too cold, wouldn't seal, and leaked, and blew the whole damn thing up, and killed everybody. Um, but that was only like a few degrees change in temperature caused that disaster. Yeah, there were judgment calls and all that sort of stuff, and the scandal, blah, blah, blah. I don't belittle that, but I'm looking at just the technical aspects of this. And when you get down to it, it was like, 5-degree change in temperature meant that that gasket wouldn't work properly. Now you relate that to your car, and you routinely, without even thinking about it, expect it to run more or less flawlessly between a temperature range of 120 degrees to minus 50. And it does. That's a huge range of temperatures where this piece of technology works just fine. Now you look at the other shuttle disaster, the one with landing, again, fatal to the crew, um, and there was no recovery from that. I mean, they were going to die. That was it. What was the cause? A few pounds of foam falls off the external fuel tank, dings one of the uh, heat shield tiles on the shuttle, everybody dies. Well, that's the equivalent of your next door neighbor's kid banging into the bumper of your car and putting a scratch on it, and the next time you turn the key, you die. Right? It's just, what? No. So the tolerances are so fine, and the margin of error is so thin. As I said, it's a miracle that people don't die more frequently. And here's the thing. Every time somebody dies, we stop. Yes, there should be an investigation, but I mean, it can be 2 years or more before, things start up again. We're kind of a victim of our own success in that we're just not used to people dying going in through this enterprise. And it's a profound shock when somebody does. And I think to a certain extent it's a disservice to the people who do die that we do stop so dramatically. back to the automobile again. How many people die every day on the highway with cars? Crashes, being run over, whatever. And I can't say we're okay with it, but we have consigned ourselves to the notion that they're inherently kind of dangerous and people are going to die. And thousands do every year. We're not used to this notion of death. And it's going to become more frequent. It has to. With the new vigorous exploration of space, with Blue Origin, with SpaceX, with other countries stepping up, um, much more aggressive exploration plans. The cadence for getting people into space is going to increase. There's no doubt about that. And if we focus on SpaceX, because they're certainly, I would say, the most successful currently, and their new rocket program, the Starship program, they're proposing at some point launching 100 people at a time. The odds of people dying are going to go up because more and more people are going to go. Uh, Really almost an exponential growth over the next, 10 years, 20 years. It'll probably taper off again for a while. But can you imagine hundreds of people going up into space? At some point, some of those people are going to die. Either on launch, on landing, or re-entry, which are, I guess, mechanically at least, inherently the most dangerous stages. But there's also then dying in space. And as far as I know, nobody has done that yet. I mean, there might be some secrets out there about people dying in space. But as far as I know, we haven't had anybody die in space. I suppose the closest thing that we came to, and again, this was a flat-out miracle that we got them back, was the Apollo 13 mission. They did a pretty good job in the movie of portraying the effort made, and it was a huge effort, and it wasn't just NASA. It was an international effort by experts all over the world contributing to trying to figure out how to get these 3 astronauts back alive. One of the things, though, that you really don't get in the movie, and it really wasn't the topic of the movie anyways, but it just didn't matter how many experts were involved, how much expert advice was offered. Those 3 men were on their own. There was absolutely no support available to them other than the resources that were on the ship itself and their capabilities. That was it. They were completely on their own. And there were so many opportunities where it could have gone wrong or not wrong, and just it was flat out impossible to resolve the problem. The explosion just enough to harm the ship and have to force a abort of the whole mission, but not enough to actually kill them outright. It could have been just fractions of a second more of an explosion, and that wouldn't have been it. Swinging around the moon to return, that could have gone horribly wrong. And then the comical bit where they were firing to get an entry point back to Earth, um, that shouldn't have worked. I mean, the way they swung around in that, and I thought it was a great portrayal, that simply shouldn't have worked. They should have skipped off or just burned up in the atmosphere, um, and yet they made it back. But consider if it hadn't been successful and they have died up there. And I mean, I'm sure that there's been people doing what if scenarios with proper orbital mechanical calculations and all that sort of stuff to figure out where the ship and their bodies would wind up in any given scenario. They would have not ultimately escaped Earth's gravitational influence. So they would have swung out maybe around the moon and gone off into deep space, but eventually they would have swung back somehow. A ghost ship with 3 men on board that nobody could get. And that would haunt us for a long time. And every time the ship would come back closer to the Earth, there would be discussions about, can we go get them? Can we launch them? Can we launch a recovery mission? Consider what we do, the extent that we go to recover sunken ships. The Kursk is submarine is a good example. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to recover, a bunch of dead bodies. I don't belittle the effort or want to, belittle their deaths, but enormous amounts of money were spent on that, and they were in reach. Now we have people who are going to die out in space, and we're not going to be able to go get them. And we're going to need to get used to that. Going to Mars. Elon has talked about, first few missions, you're probably going to die. It seems like a brush-off sort of comment, but I think he does think about it. And certainly, I believe, is aware of the consequences of people dying, and slowly getting people used to the idea, I suppose, because people are going to die on the way back, trying to land on Mars. Ultimately, though, and as I said early in the video, people are going to die on some other celestial body other than Earth. That has some pretty important aspects to it, philosophical perhaps, religious if you want, that maybe somebody's talked about, but I haven't heard anything about it. It's going to be important to be aware of bodies being buried on Mars, not being returned to Earth. And they won't be. It's simply economically not sensible. That's an important aspect to think about. What about the person's soul? For those that are believers in that, do their souls reside on Mars? Do they return to Earth? Um, that's going to be discussed, and it's going to worry some people. I'm sure of that. Personally, I'm not concerned about that, and I will cover why with regards to the soul or the consciousness of the individual, where it resides. I don't believe, personally, that it matters because it resides everywhere. I'll explain that in another video of one of my really esoteric topics. We need to have a discussion, an open and frank discussion about death and dying in space. We have to get ready for that. It's going to happen, and it can't paralyze us. I'm a firm believer, as Elon Musk has stated over and over again, that we need to be a multiplanetary species if we are to survive. At this stage, I mean, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, we were fine. Now, with our population pressures and our environmental pressures and our resource pressures and just the pressure of needing, and I think it is a paramount, primary need for us to constantly be moving forward. We need to be a multiplanetary species. We need to get off this rock and spread ourselves out. Certainly for young people, I think it's stupendously important that they have goals that are beyond their reach and something they can aspire to. Now, speaking of youth, the first people that go need to be old farts, like me. I'll cover that later. Next time.